This is Wan. Today we are joined by Uri Peleg, a super high-stake player, coach or upswing and wizard who are famous for exploitative approach. Hi Uri, it's an honor to have you there.
Hey, very nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I only know you as Wan. Is that how I should address you?
Oh yeah, let me introduce myself briefly. My name is Wan. I'm a professional poker player now. I started my poker career from 4 years ago and focus on online game. I play from NL10 and I play NL500 and NL1000 now. You could just call me Wan. I think I like this nickname.
Thank you. Happy to be here. So yeah, this course that we're going to be reviewing basically some of your hands based on the framework from my new course, which we have translated into Chinese, I think for the first time. And one of the basic ideas of the course, maybe I'll ask you, do you know about something really old? It's before you started playing. Have you heard of a beluga whale?
Nope. I think I would have known as soon as you told me.
Yeah, so it's say like 11 years ago, there was a famous American player named Andrew Seidman, I think, or beluga whale. And he came up with a framework for thinking about poker hands, which he called reasons for betting. He said that whenever you have a betting decision, you need to think what are the reasons to bet, and the reasons can be either to get called by worse or to fold out better or to get protection for your hand.
Oh,
And
I think I have heard this one.
yeah, everyone has heard it and everyone talks about it, but he's the person who came up with this framework. And I think in the course part of what I do is I kind of go with a more modern framework, which I think is simpler but also more flexible than this way of thinking about whether or not to bet. And yeah, hopefully we see that through your hands. So I think the best way to explain it is as we're going through hands. Yeah, so if you think it's good, I'm happy to jump into some hands.
Thanks. Actually, most of the players already know you, so we don't need to spend more time on introductions. Let's get started on today's topic. My day of trial. Yuri will help me review and critique some hands from my latest NL500 session. And before that, let's ask a question that might be politically incorrect. How do you find the images of players from different countries?
I have an opinion about Chinese players, and I wonder what you think of it as a Chinese player. Because some countries are very easy, like German players are generally very conservative. Israeli players are big calling stations. And, Finnish players and Brazilian players are very aggressive. But what I've found about Chinese players, I have a feeling that they care more about winning than they care about money necessarily. So they are making the most creative plays by far, and sometimes I get this feeling when I'm playing against a Chinese player that he is more likely to call me if I bet 5 times the pot than if I bet half pot, because it's a more exciting story. Would that fit? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes sense, and I need to say I can't argue with that. It's kind of crazy and very creative.
Yeah, so it's very fascinating because Chinese players, they will call in spots that nobody calls, and they will bluff in spots that nobody bluffs. So it's a very different type of poker player than the general guy that you play against. But definitely every country is a bit different, and Americans have their their things that they do. But I always find Chinese players the most out-of-the-box thinkers of everyone by a decent margin.
So you think they are creative?
Sorry?
You think they play a very creative?
Yes, definitely.
Thank you for your opinion, and say it's pretty funny. Now let's start to review my hands. We picked 5 hands from my late session on NL500, and the first one, before we start our hands, I'd like to play a hand which is not a big pot, but important for play images. And I have watched your new course, the Poker Blueprint, a very useful one, and you used 3 videos taking notes for the players and explaining the importance of understanding opponent's tendencies.
Yeah.
So this hand is good for us to know our opponent's style because I have played 3 hands with this guy. So let's watch it quickly. It was a 3-way pot. Not big, but could see opponent's type. This Kakalot called call UTG open, and we called in big blind. Flop we hit top pair and check. Kakalot bet a half, and we called UTG called. Turn is a 4 heart, and Kakalot continue half pot. I fold my Jack Queen here because I think it's not good enough to call a 3-way pot again, and there was still UTG behind. So that's what makes me think my queen. I think my queen is not good enough as a kicker. But when they check and check on this river, Kakalot showed Jack 8 suited.
Perfect. Very, very interesting hand to start.
So we could know this Kakalot is a loose aggressive and kind of overplay top pair. And we note him as a loose aggressive
it's a bit complicated, and maybe if we jump into this hand as just a hand to talk about, one of the things in the course framework was, I said whenever you have a hand, you always think how big of a pot size does my hand want. And I think that given the action on the flop is 3-way, you kind of recognize correctly once his second bet goes in that the pot is a bit too big for your queen jack, right? Which is why you decide to fold. Now the interesting thing is that once you use the simple framework, you can start asking other questions where how likely does each of these players have you beat? You could say, well, UTG, he called after this guy bet half pot and you called behind, so he's very likely to fast play, to re-raise with anything that queens, kings, aces, 2-pair, etc. So he actually doesn't have you beat very often. Kakalot, he's, like you said, he's a recreational and he's starting to give you information, and one of the pieces of information he's giving you is he's betting half pot only on this very connected board with a lot of draws, and that's very often a sign of weakness from recreational players. And it's so much so that in this kind of spot, if I were to play a bit blind, I would consider just check raising on the turn. Say you had King 7 of clubs or something like that, UTG doesn't seem very strong, and this guy doesn't seem very strong, so I think actually a turn check raise would work fairly well. So I think it's an interesting option to consider even here. And in addition to how you profile him, you should also think about his bet sizing, because he went half pot twice with a weak top pair. And we need to remember this, because maybe next hand he goes pot, and then we will think, oh, this is not the same type of situation, right?
Yeah, I need to admit that I didn't notice his sizing tail at that time. So you mean you think when recreationals bet half, they mostly don't have strong hands, right? Is this the MDA database you made?
Yeah, I mean sometimes, but yeah, let's see the next hand, and we'll see how we can use the information. I agree. He is an aggressive recreational. He is overplaying his top pair. He's loose. All of those are true as well. The things you mentioned.
Okay, setting tail.
Yeah, but also the sizing, I think, is very important. Go ahead.
With this hand, Kakarot opened 3 big blind in UTG. Face UTG open, we could 3-bet or just call with this hand, but since we have a loose aggressive note for him, I prefer to 3-bet. And one thing worth nothing is that I think the bigger sets our opponents open, the less we should call by just 3-bet or fold, especially when auto position. Do you agree?
Yeah, 100%. And another thing to note is that when you're against a loose recreational, you can actually 3-bet bigger than you're used to. So rather than go 60, you can go 80, because they're not very sensitive to these sizing changes.
Yeah, I guess I play a little nerd there. So many factors contribute to 3-bet, and we just 3-bet. Yeah, and he called flop ace turn, two-tone.
Perfect. So first thing on the flop, you have to ask yourself, how big of a pot does pocket jacks want? What do you think?
I usually just range bet small on this board. Pocket jack wanted betting small, so we could keep his range wide and let him raise his ace x, I guess.
Yeah, but again, the way that we think about it in the course is we don't necessarily... I agree with you, you can just range bet, but try to take a step back and ask before you range bet, how big of a pot do you want with pocket jacks? And maybe is the answer about $200, or is it bigger or smaller than $200 given this situation? Like if you bet and he calls, can you bet again?
I think it depends on the turn. I want to keep his range wide on the flop.
So yeah, so I think what you're doing is perfectly fine. This is how most people play, but the idea of considering it is that if you say, well, my hand wants to put $30 in and that's it, right? No more. Then you can pause and ask yourself, well, what is the best way to do that against this type of player? And maybe the answer that you reach is, you know, this guy, maybe I would rather check to let him bluff. Or if it goes check, I know I have the best hand, I can put in more than $30 because he's so aggressive in the Jack-8 hand, you don't expect him to check back an ace, right? So if it goes check, suddenly you can go for a bigger pot. If you check, he goes half pot, maybe you can fold straight away. So you have all these possibilities that open. once you go away from just range bet because that is the theoretical play, to saying, oh, my hand wants a $200 pot, but this is the player, and then what's the best way to get there? And I would think that against this player, I rather check with jacks. I don't think the bet is putting you necessarily in a comfortable situation against an aggressive opponent. It's great against a passive opponent, but an aggressive opponent, often he will call and then start betting, and then you are kind of in a bad spot with jacks.
Wow, that's why you're a coach and I'm a student. Yeah, I think he may just check back once I check, and that's what I didn't want to see.
Yeah, go ahead.
Anyway, I range bet small, and he just called. On the turn, it repeats a turn, and I just checked. Actually, I'm not sure at this spot because I'm really not sure if the actual pocket jack is good enough to continue, so I just checked. But I also want to bet small to induce him to bluff raise, but I'm not sure if he would really bluff raise there. So too many factors, and I just checked with this hand.
Yeah, I think checking is perfect. And again, if we think about the pot size, we would say, well, this is the pot size we're aiming for. So there's no reason for us to bet anymore once the pot is at this size. So really the checking, I think, is the only option. And now it's interesting that he goes half pot again, right? Which is the same size as the jack 8, so it doesn't give us any new information.
I check back river and plan to bluff catch with this hand.
And now he goes half pot again. So this is his only button, this guy.
He only bet half. Yeah.
Yeah,
he only bet half.
So tell me your thoughts here.
I think some ace X would raise the flop and play face up. Some his TX would just check the turn, so he didn't have so much full house there. It's easy to call, but the real tricky part is once he shove river, should we call it? In this hand, he just bet half, and this size is suspicious. More like a bluff, but don't want to be stacked by a slow play ace X, I think. But mostly, I think his value would be bigger size, like just showing or at least.
Well, I'll say a few things. I think that you make a really good point about what you said, that you think he will often raise with an ace on the flop because you bet small and he looks like a loose aggressive player, right? You have this profile. You don't expect him to trap, right? He didn't check with a jack 8. So you think if you bet small, board has a flush draw and a straight draw, he will raise his ace, right? Once you have that kind of read, then we can say, well, on the turn, all of his pocket pairs get counterfeited, so he has a million bluffs to choose from. This guy's also very loose. He can have 5-7 suited or all these hands. So he really has a million bluffs, not too many ace X. And so really once you make that very strong read that I really like about him not having trips, which we can make because of the jack 8 hand, I think you just happily call anything he does. Right? Because there are so many bluffs, but not that many ace X that he can have.
Yeah, so I just called, and he had pocket 6. what do you think? Like, should we continue on this turn, or should we call his river shove?
Yeah,
Once
I
he
think
shove.
so. I think, but it's interesting that he went half pot again. Definitely interesting.
Yeah, and the next hand also played with this interesting guy.
Let's see.
As you can see, I opened 8-9 suited in button, and he called in big blind. Flop, I just hit nuts, and small bet again. Not sure about this size. I think maybe I should bet bigger with this high SPR.
Well, let me say again, because this
Yeah.
it's an important point, because you want to get all the money in, right, if you can, but you also know that this player seems more aggressive. If he were a passive player, right, if you have a reason to think he's more passive, you definitely need to bet
Of
bigger,
course.
because he's not helping you to put money in, right? The second that you think he's more aggressive, I really like either betting small or checking to give him a chance to bluff with a draw or to raise with a 9 or all these
Yep.
things that a more aggressive
Yep.
player will do.
Even I have finished your course, I think I need to review it again. But I think we can be sure he's so aggressive just with that one hand. Actually, I'm not sure if he is aggressive or actually under bluff.
No, I mean, we have the sixes hand as well, right? With sixes where he bluffs twice, fairly big. So I think it's enough at this point to say he is actively putting in money. A decent bit. He doesn't need a very good hand. But also it's just pushing us between kind of close decisions, right? We're not making... I wouldn't tell you to do something crazy because of this. But yeah. Okay, so he bets the turn.
Yeah, he dunked.
Are you gonna raise?
He dunked the turn. It's a dunk.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Actually, I think I raised. Yeah, I raised there because I want to build the pot. Also, I think he hit something like the 7 completed the street, and
yeah, I think again, because he's a bit loose, you can go bigger. He's not doing math in his head and stuff like this.
Yeah, I think he would never fold his street, and the size may be smaller. Yeah, and on the river, I think this river is a blank. If he had straight, then he must have it on the turn, and double flush or missed. I'm really not sure about the size on river, cause I'm confused about his range. I want to bet big to value his straight, and I want to bet small to value his 9x and induce his missed flush or bluff. But would his flush draw really dunk the turn? We can see, so I'm not sure about this size on the river. And I really struggled for a while about the river size. Yeah. And I think ultimately I decided to use a small size and try to induce him bluff. I think his 8x plus would just raise this small size.
How small? Oh, half pot. Okay.
Yeah. And he showed Queen 8. I didn't expect that he didn't raise flop or river with this 8x. So we really can see if he's
I
really
think that's
aggressive.
reasonable. I think that the way you played it is reasonable. It's important to remember, though, that when you bet $100 on the river, a lot of recreationals, they don't think it's small, they think it's just $100, which maybe it's a big bet for him. You know, they don't think you made a half pot bet, just about the size of your bet. So even though it feels small to you, as a recreational, it's not that small. So I'm not sure you actually induce very well with this. If I wanted to induce, I would bet $20 or $30. I think this is maybe a bit too big to induce, and you can see even with trips he didn't raise against this. And yeah, it's interesting. You're right. He could have all sorts of hands. It's a tricky situation. His range is very, very unclear. But what you should try to do is focus on the hands that will put in more money. So you can say, if he has a busted flush draw, probably he is just folding, right? So we don't care about those hands. If he has a 9, let's say he will call up to a half pot bet. And then if he has better than a 9, he will probably call anything you bet, right? Even all in. And then we try to think what is more likely and which part of the range we choose to play against. If you want to play against his busted flush draws, you bet $20. If you want to bet against his 9, you bet $100. If you want to bet against straights and trips, you just go all in. And I'm not sure which is best, but I think to be organized and thinking about it is very important.
Okay, so my size is actually kind of targeting 9x.
I think so. And I don't think a 9 is very likely to donk bet the turn. But nothing is very likely, so who knows? It's tough to know.
Yeah, I think you can never be sure what recreationals will do next. Yeah. Oh right. I lost the $20,000 in 2 days on WPT Global. So let's see one of my hands on WPT. If you have any interest, very interesting one. Since let me try to find it. 最后的话呢，想要和大家推荐一下Uri的新课，叫做扑克蓝图。他们第一次呢做了中文的翻译，所以看起来十分流畅，没有什么语言的障碍。我觉得这套课程比较珍贵的地方就是Uri全程都没有使用复杂的数学公式，也没有用 solver， 但是他已经把自己10几年的一个教学经验呢，还有就是一些使用 solver 的结论都放在视频里了。而且每个视频都只有10几分钟，没有1小时那么长。因为我本人如果看1小时的视频的话，就会有点打瞌睡，然后有点看不进去。我觉得10几分钟的时长还是蛮适合每天去看的。它主要讲的呢，就是一些打牌的基本原则，还有如何根据你自己的自然的直觉去自然的打牌，然后还有一些他最擅长的剥削部分，怎样去剥削玩家池。我个人看完，我觉得是非常适合去巩固基础以及去打开你的思维的。本来Uri跟我说让我帮忙推荐一下这套课程，但是我说中文社区的玩家一般不太会选 Upswing 看课，因为就算你的英文很好，也还是看中文课的效率会高一些嘛。但是他说呢，他们已经做了中文的翻译，已经想到这一点了。然后我去看了一下中文翻译，确实做得很棒，很精准，应该是找中文的玩家去翻译的吧。我觉得做起来就很用心。那这套课程的价格的话呢，它售价是500美，会稍微有一点点贵，但是它里面有59个视频，所以如果你去换算下来的话，我觉得还是蛮值当的。里面还会有很多Uri的很详细的 live play， 如果大家感兴趣呢，我已经把购买的链接，也就是 Upswing 的官网放在了这个视频的下面，大家可以从视频下面直接点击进入官网购买。OK， 那这个视频的话也已经够长了，我不想让视频太长，所以我们今天就先到这里啦。大家下期见，也祝大家提前预祝各位新年快乐。 拜拜。